Today is Friday, October 13th. We have a major new development to tell you about out of Israel, as more than 1 million people are warned to evacuate. Also, Republicans are going back to the drawing board. Their nominee for the GOP's top job quit the race. Plus, how to safely watch this weekend's solar eclipse. Why Taylor Swift's movie version of her Eras tour hit theaters a day early. And the teenagers inspiring a generation. Those stories and more news to know next. Welcome to The Newsworthy. All the day's news in around 10 minutes. Fast, fair, fun, and on the go. I'm Erica Mandy. Thanks so much for being here. You ready? Let's do this. The war in the Middle East could be headed toward catastrophe. Israel's military has told the United Nations to evacuate 1.1 million Palestinians in 24 hours to take them from the north part of the Gaza Strip to the south. A request Hamas is telling people to ignore. The UN says Israel's evacuation request is impossible without, quote, devastating humanitarian consequences. It's tough for people to leave since roads have been destroyed and fuel has been blocked. It's not clear exactly why Israel made that request now, but reports predict this is likely a sign a ground invasion is coming soon as part of Israel's response to Hamas's terror attack last weekend. And Israel's ground troops and tanks are already in position. Of course, this all comes after thousands of people have already died. Also starting today, the U.S. government is sending flights for American citizens and their families who want to leave Israel. And it's looking into ways to do land and sea evacuations, too. American Secretary of State Antony Blinken was in Israel yesterday to show solidarity and support. He says he also talked to Israeli officials about protecting civilians in Gaza and efforts to provide humanitarian assistance. Now, while Blinken visits other Mideast allies, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin landed in Israel this morning. The U.S. has also reached an informal agreement with Qatar to hold off on distributing the $6 billion in oil revenue that Iran was allowed as part of a prisoner exchange. This as the Biden administration tries to figure out whether Iran helped Hamas with its deadly and brutal attack. So far, American officials have said they don't see any evidence of that. But Iran has warned that the, quote, continuation of war crimes against Palestinians could open a new front of war. So, to be continued. In the U.S. today, there's going to be more law enforcement around Jewish religious and community centers, Jewish-owned businesses, and Israeli diplomatic buildings. And some Jewish institutions are just shutting down entirely. They're taking an abundance of caution because there has been conversation growing online about attacking the Jewish community in the U.S. and elsewhere. Law enforcement officials say they're monitoring threats, but that none of them are specific or credible. Remember, a former Hamas leader called for today to be a global day of anger, to specifically send a message to Jews and Americans. Historically, similar calls of actions have brought unrest to the Middle East, but they haven't led to any large-scale attacks in the U.S. Still, several law enforcement agencies all around the country have told all of their officers to report to duty today to provide security. It seems the U.S. House is even further away from being able to get back to business. You know how we told you yesterday GOP members picked Majority Leader Steve Scalise as their Speaker nominee? Well, he has since dropped out of the Speaker race, saying he wasn't able to get enough support for a full House vote. So at this point, the House is still frozen, unable to pass any new bills. Republicans are meeting again today to talk about what to do next. The U.S. senator who has already been accused of taking bribes is now facing a serious new criminal charge. Federal prosecutors say while Senator Bob Menendez was leading the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, he was also acting as a foreign agent on behalf of Egypt. Specifically, they're charging the longtime lawmaker, his wife, and a New Jersey businessman with working to promote the interests of the Egyptian government. They also say Menendez passed on highly sensitive information and more. Of course, public officials aren't allowed to act as foreign agents, and even if he wasn't in office, he would have had to register with the Justice Department, which he didn't do. All in all, Menendez now faces 4 criminal counts, and if found guilty, he could spend decades in prison. Though the senator pleaded not guilty to the earlier bribery charges, he hasn't specifically responded to these latest charges. His wife's lawyer, though, says they plan to fight every allegation in court. Senator Menendez already gave up his chairmanship of the Foreign Relations Committee just temporarily, but so far he has refused to resign, despite facing calls to do so. Millions of Americans should be able to see a solar eclipse tomorrow. It's known as the Ring of Fire eclipse, where the moon slides in front of the sun, but doesn't totally obscure it. And with that, it leaves a halo of light around the edges. So long as the weather is good, people should be able to see it across several states from Oregon to Texas. Specifically, it will begin in Oregon around 9 a.m. Pacific time and end in Texas at around noon Central time. Other parts of the U.S. will see a partial eclipse. But keep in mind, you'll need to wear eclipse safety glasses the entire time to protect your eyes while looking at the sun. Regular sunglasses will not cut it. Another option is to watch NASA's live stream. We have more news for you coming up, but first I want to let you know about our sponsor, Copilot. One of the things I've always liked about workout classes is that I don't have to plan any sort of workout myself. But often, life happens, and getting there to the class on a regular basis can sometimes feel sort of impossible. But getting back to consistently working out has finally happened thanks to the Copilot app. I am so impressed at the care my Copilot trainer has put toward our conversations, messages, and the workouts she has created just for me, my body, and my lifestyle. Suddenly, working out consistently is doable. And anytime something isn't feeling right or I have a question, I'm amazed at how quickly she responds and adjusts my workouts as needed. And I love that it's getting the benefits of personal training without a hefty price. I'd love for you to follow my lead to get fit and feel fabulous. Give Copilot a try to find out why it was listed by Forbes as the top-rated personal trainer app of 2023. Head to go.mycopilot.com/newsworthy to get a 14-day free trial with your own personal trainer. That's go.mycopilot.com/newsworthy to get a free 14-day trial with your very own personal trainer. Take a back seat and let Copilot help you reach your fitness goals. Now back to the news. More than 71 million Americans who get Social Security benefits will start getting bigger checks next year. The Social Security Administration says all beneficiaries, from retirees to disabled workers, will get the same cost of living adjustment, an extra 3.2%. That's a big drop from the bump they saw this year when payments increased 8.7%, but it's still more than what's typical. On average, it will mean people will get about $60 more a month for a total check of just about $1,900. Of course, this is all tied to inflation. Some say this year's increase isn't enough, while others point out there's a much bigger problem ahead. Social Security is set to have a pretty significant financial shortfall in the next decade, and these cost of living adjustments could make the fund's reserves run out even sooner. Ultimately, it's up to Congress to decide whether to raise taxes or reduce benefits in the next few years. Bringing down inflation is proving to be even tougher than expected. The Consumer Price Index, which measures what we pay for goods and services, went up again last month. It was just a tick higher than expected and a far cry from what we saw last year. But inflation still is not slowing down quite as fast as economists were hoping for. The biggest culprits are housing and gas. And as the conflict in the Middle East unfolds, gas definitely isn't expected to get any cheaper. Overall, the inflation rate landed at 3.7%. The Federal Reserve wants to see it hit 2%. Now, Fed officials say they don't expect that to happen until 2026. Nearly a month into a historic auto workers strike, the costs are really piling up. Data out this week says the walkout has resulted in more than $5.5 billion in economic losses. And that number is expected to rise since workers have since walked out of more plants. And still, it doesn't seem like there's any deal on the horizon. Most recently, the United Auto Workers Union shut down Ford's biggest and most profitable plant globally. And UAW's president says there may be further action taken today against Stellantis. In the meantime, Ford, GM, and Stellantis have all announced layoffs at plants that haven't been hit by strikes, saying they're necessary since shutdowns have eliminated their work. Nearly 5,000 workers have been let go so far. And while we're talking about strikes, here's a quick update about what's happening in Hollywood. Negotiations between the Actors Union and the studios broke down this week. There are apparently still big disagreements over how performers should be compensated from streaming. The two sides are also struggling to reach common ground on the use of artificial intelligence. So for now, the actors' strike is going on indefinitely. The weekend hasn't even started yet, and already the movie industry has a good idea of what's going to win the weekend box office. Taylor Swift's movie version of her Eras Tour is already out in theaters. Originally, it was set to come out today, but after selling more than $100 million worth of pre-sale tickets and leaving many people waiting in the queues, the opening got bumped up by a day. And movie theaters are really embracing it, some even loosening up their rules for Swifties. For example, many theaters are encouraging people to stand, sing, dance, and take selfies like it were a real concert. Some are featuring Swift-style merchandise, complete with friendship bracelet-making stations. A couple even renovated theaters ahead of time. Taylor Swift herself was at the premiere on Wednesday night, and like the rest of the audience, she was singing and dancing along. Then last night, the pop star was back in Kansas City, once again watching her rumored boyfriend, Travis Kelce, and the rest of the Chiefs take on the Denver Broncos. And with that, it could end up being Amazon's most watched Thursday night football stream ever. That's it for the main news today, so now it's time for Feel Good Friday, when we bring you one extra feel-good or positive news story before the weekend. But first, a quick break for our sponsor, Lumi. I am so excited to tell you about it because it's my favorite new deodorant. Again, it's called Lumi, and it's a uniquely formulated pH-balanced deodorant. It's aluminum-free, paraben-free, skin-safe, and clinically proven to control odor for up to 72 hours. In fact, while I mostly use it for my underarms, it is a whole-body deodorant if you want it, the first of its kind. So that means it's seriously safe to use anywhere on your body. Pits, feet, belly buttons, and beyond. The truth is, the deodorants that I've loved in the past just were not working for me anymore, so I needed something new. And I found it. Unlike some deodorants that try to mask odor with a fragrance, Lumi is formulated and powered by mandelic acid to stop odor before it starts. Lumi's starter pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice like mini body wash and deodorant wipes that are both perfect for on the go, and free shipping. As a special offer for listeners, new customers get $5 off a Lumi starter pack with the code NEWSWORTHY at LumiDeodorant.com. That equates to over 40% off your starter pack when you visit LumiDeodorant.com and use the code NEWSWORTHY. That's Lumi, L-U-M-E, deodorant.com with the code NEWSWORTHY. Okay, now back to Feel Good Friday. All around the world, people celebrated International Day of the Girl earlier this week. Of course, there are many, many girls worth celebrating. But this year, First Lady Jill Biden specifically recognized 15 of them, saying each one has been working to improve their communities. For example, a 15-year-old from California who works to combat online harassment and abuse. A 16-year-old in New York who works with students to address anti-Semitism in their schools. A 17-year-old from Colorado who developed a tool to detect lead contamination. And another 17-year-old from Virginia who came to the U.S. from Afghanistan 4 years ago and now helps other refugees resettle in her community. Some of the others who were there advocate for disability rights, support military children, and work to bring books to disadvantaged children. And that's just naming a few. Now the White House hopes they can serve as examples for other kids who also want to make a difference. All right, we'll be back tomorrow with our special edition Saturday episode, offering more context and analysis of the attack and now war in Israel. And of course, we'll be back on Monday with your next news roundup. For now, thank you so much for listening and have a great weekend.